Welcome back on into Conversations. I'm your host, Drew Patrick, and today I am happy to be joined by the one, the only, Mark Polonia. Mark, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me on, Drew.
So I'm really excited to talk with you because I don't know, we've talked about your movies, but I don't think we've ever actually talked about in depth your career. So I know with people who do work in film and like to make movies, there's always that one thing or that one film that first got them into filmmaking. Do you know what that one film was for you?
Absolutely. I was 5 years old, 5 or 6, I can't remember which, but it was a rainy Saturday. I couldn't go outside and play. Not that I would anyway. I'd have probably watched TV, but there was a Godzilla movie on, Godzilla versus the Thing, which is Godzilla versus Mothra, and it was scary but fascinating at the same time because you have this gigantic monster breathing fire and fighting a giant moth and two caterpillars, twin caterpillars, because I was a twin, so I related to that, and the whole thing just really, a light went on, and I remember thinking, whatever this is, I want to do this. And from that point on, it was a matter of finding books at the library. We lived close to a library, so we could walk to the library and get books. They had books on filmmaking, not many, but they did. I purchased a book at some point and just began the process of self-investigating and self-exploring the process, from writing a script to eventually getting a camera and shooting silent narratives and then moving to sound. And, it's one step leads to another, to another, to another, till you find yourself shooting features. It sounds simple, but it was a very long haul. But that's the nutshell of it.
So your first couple of films, when you first started out, A, I want to know what they were about, and then B, what were some of the things early on? Because you develop a style, and a lot of that happens, I want to say early on. I could be very wrong, but I want to say early on. So what was it about your very first, or a style, or something you took from those very early films that you brought into your next group?
Well, it's always a learning process, and no matter how many movies you make, the last one's always terrible because you see all the mistakes and you can do it better. But the early ones were really terrible. You're still grasping the tools, which is a camera, framing, cutting, resetting. I mean, they were crude, to say the least. And you can view all these on different DVDs that my movies are on, have extras. So ultimately, if you wanted to, you could trace the very first movie we ever made to the very last one we made professionally. I mean, it's all out there, warts and all, for you to see. But there was something fascinating about shooting something and then projecting it. And then you look at it and go, well, we'll try this next time. We'll try this. Experience is a good teacher. And as far as developing a style, that's a really good question that really doesn't have a very good answer. A filmic style is just like an artist painting style. I don't think you're cognitive of it when you're in the middle of the process, but you do see it later. I wouldn't be able to describe my style. I think that's left for other people to do.
All right.
I mean, I can watch things from 10 years ago to today and see a lot of progression, and certainly you keep going backwards and you can see it, but I don't think anyone's style is ever really there. I mean, I can't say I'm a Michael Bay guy, so everything blows up every 5 minutes. It's not that kind of a style. I think it's how you approach a project and the time that you have to do it and the resources you have at your fingertips, and how you see things. Your style, I guess, is really how you visually see something. When you take words on a piece of paper and translate it to a visual or moving medium, the way you perceive that visually becomes your style, whether that's long takes, quick shots, handheld, steady cam, whatever. It all adds up.
Yeah. So you started Polonia Brothers Entertainment with your twin brother.
Correct.
First of all, I want to know what it's like to have a twin. Because that seems like it can either be the greatest thing or the worst thing.
It was great. I wouldn't know what being a twin's like unless I was a triplet, because I never saw two of me. To me, he was just my brother.
Mm-hmm.
We were very close, but to others, we were twins. And I get that, but I didn't see that unless I looked at old photos and like which one is which. Sometimes I can't even tell, but it was great because, we were a team. Can't really say. I mean, being a twin is a great experience, and unless you are one, it's really hard to explain it to somebody.
So I know again, I don't know, so I shouldn't say I know, but like, did you find that with you and your brother John that you guys were on the same page for certain things you wanted to do for films, or was there disagreements and arguments over certain factors?
There's always disagreements. We had different approaches to things, but we handled different roles. So he did some, we both did 50-50 on the writing, but he handled all the special effects. He did all the special makeup effects and things, and I did more of the on-set directing and running the camera. So our movies always had lots of special effects in them and lots of night and action scenes and stuff. So it all worked out. But yeah, we absolutely disagreed. I remember one night, and I don't know how this even happened, but he literally broke every light that we had. I said, "How could you do this?" It was just an accident, but it led to a big argument on one of our Super 8 movies. It's 2 a.m. and now we have no lights because they got knocked over and blew out. But at the time it was frustrating, but we thought it was funny later.
So with your films that are low budget and with the special effects and that stuff, it almost forces you to be more creative. Am I wrong in assuming that like with a lower budget you have to find ways to make things look great while not having a lot of the resources that some other films have?
Yes, you're absolutely correct, because on a big budget movies, when you have a problem, the solution is to just throw more money at it, and we certainly don't have that. So you have to be creative, you have to think on your feet. And that's the exciting part. Everything challenges you. There's no easy way out, because things happen on a film shoot. No matter how well you plan things, you can't control the weather. You can't control a swarm of bees that flies into the middle of your location. There's just things that are out of your control. So you have to really be ready to solve things at a moment's notice and think on your feet without compromising what you're trying to do.
I feel like the bees is an actual story, and I kind of want to hear.
We were on a set. We were on a location, not a set, and you always have mosquitoes and bees. I think someone was covered in fake blood, and there must have been bees that got wind of it, because 2 turned into 10 and 10 turned into 30, so we had to run for cover in our cars until they decided to leave.
Oh no!
And put us behind about a half hour.
That's a nightmare.
But these are things that just happen. You just can't control it. So you got to figure out, what if an actor doesn't show up? What if they don't know their dialogue? What if they don't? There's a million things that could go wrong, but it's the answer is there's no such thing as a problem, only a solution, and that's how you approach it. And it's done us well for God knows all these years. We've never had any real on-set catastrophes.
That's a good. I want to talk though about some of those challenges too, and what is one that sticks with you that you remember that you made, I guess, lemonade out of the lemon that was thrown into you, something that went horribly wrong on paper, but you turned it into something very good in your film? If there's ever that moment.
I can't think of anything specific because I like to plan things, so I leave little to fate. But occasionally, I've shot 75 features, and sometimes you're working through a picture and you're shooting it, and you just don't think it's going well. You just get the sense that this is just something's not working. This happened and we had to change this. We had to move indoors. This was supposed to be outside. And then at the end of the day, you look at it and you go, this isn't that bad. Some of the things that happened were better. They force you to make better decisions. Any movie you make is all you see at first is what should have been. And it takes you years, or at least me, to go back and look at it in the light that most people would and go, wow, that turned out really good. Or I'm surprised we were able to do this. But I think every movie you make lemonade out of lemons. At the micro budget level, that's what you're served to start with. So it's always a challenge.
What is it like to be approached for one of your movies to go commercial? That first time you were offered, hey, we're going to do a decently wide release of this. What is that moment like?
It's different for everyone, but I remember the first. We shot a movie called Splatter Farm, which is a farm-themed horror picture about this psychopath who lives on a farm with his aunt, and they kill people. It was like a Friday the 13th type thing, and we were 17 when we made it. It got released not even a year later when we were 18. And of course, it's like, because that was the big video boom. Wouldn't it be great if we could see one of our movies on a shelf? And then you walk into a store and see it, and it's for 5 minutes. It's like, wow, that you feel like you've accomplished something, but then that fades, and it's like, okay, we have to do this again. Yeah. And you kind of forget about it. But yeah, it's a short high. It's not something you can rest your laurels on your entire life. But it's exciting and it's interesting. Our movies are all over the world. People don't realize this, but not just the United States. Our movies are in France, Germany, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, South America, England. I mean, they are everywhere. They're all over the world, and they've played in every format or streaming device or delivery device known to man. VHS, cable television, streaming, all kinds of things. Some of my films were shown at drive-ins. So it's neat that you kind of have this grassroots kind of thing that kind of evolves into this larger picture that honestly I was not even aware of, because I'm not the kind of person that stops to look at where I've been. I'm always looking ahead, and you don't have time to kind of cultivate what you've done or see the breadth of what you've accomplished, because you're too busy making other things. But it does happen. It takes time, but it's amazing, really.
So you mentioned that first commercial release was Splatter Farm, and I know for a fact that you have a sequel of that coming out relatively soon.
Next month, as a matter of fact.
All right, and I had the pleasure to be.
You were in the opening scene, yes.
It was fun. I have to say, it was really fun. But the point of that, not to toot my own horn and say I was in it, but in terms of sequels, especially when it comes to like a lot of horror and sci-fi, that's the go-to thing for a lot to be able to produce sequels. When you go in, or how do you know that a film you make, a sequel could be made out of it?
That's a good question, and time is the answer, because time, or you make piles of money off of it, which we did not make piles of money off of the original film. We got taken to the cleaners, to be quite honest. But you don't make a sequel to a movie that, when you make 75 movies, you know, everyone has their opinion of what's the best and what isn't. But a movie that has cult status, it stands the test of time. And the original was shot in 1986. So that's a long time.
Quite a bit between.
And then people always say, when are you going to make a sequel to that? It was never the right time. And I was always involved with other things. You know, I get hired by companies to produce and direct movies and stuff. So it's not always, I don't know, I may have my year booked and I don't have room to make a film I want. But one of the actors in it and a guy who helps me, Jeff Kirkendall, he said, I'm going to write something and send it to you. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And I forgot all about it. So he sends me this document. It says, return to Splatter Farm. I'm like, why would he write that? You know? And then I read it, and I was really impressed with it. And it's definitely updated, and the original left room for a sequel. And I thought, well, you know, if we're ever going to do it, we might as well do it now. The original we couldn't go back to the original farm because it's not there anymore. It's literally gone because I drove out there to see. It took me a while to remember where it was, but so we had to find a new location. And sadly, you know, the original consisted of me, my brother, our friend Todd, and his grandmother. I'm the only one left. I mean, I literally am the only one alive from that group of people. So, continuing the story was difficult because we don't have the original actors, and I'm not in it because I got offed in the first one, so I'm not coming back. But he wrote it. He wrote it in an interesting way. It's sort of it's more of an homage to 80s slasher films in general, as much as it is a continuation of the original story. And that's the thing I found interesting about it, because that genre, you know, is all but gone. It reinvents itself with movies like Scream and things like that. But it was an interesting script, and it was an interesting film to make. It really was. The location was suitably creepy. The first day we went out to shoot, we ran into no less than a skunk, a porcupine, and what else did we saw? All kinds of weird critters.
Wild
there was a bat. There was a raccoon, 2 raccoons that would follow us around. It was interesting, and to be honest, it looked similar enough to the original location that it could pass. It could easily pass. Even the inside, when I went into we rented one of the few times we've ever had to rent a location, but it was worth every penny. I remember walking inside and going, this could pass for the same place. It was even the shape of the house was even the same, which after a while it was a little unusual. You know, the more you thought about it, the more it kind of creeped into your psyche. But
wow, I want to go quickly back because you mentioned, so in 2008 your brother passed away.
Yes, that's correct.
Was it because of working together through a lot of these movies together, was it hard to then return to do another film?
Actually, yes. We were actually in the planning stages of Halloween night when he passed away. So I made the decision to finish it. And one of our high school friends, Matt Satterley, he came on board to help, and then he passed away when it was over. So that was probably the hardest film I ever made, because it was the first movie I made without him. So yeah, it was professionally, you know, upsetting, but it was personally devastating. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of factors that you're working through and that are working against you. So it was strange. It was a strange experience. The movie turned out great, but it was a long haul. it would have been easier had we been a team and made it. But we got through it, and everyone did a great job. So it made the next one easier. But I didn't jump right into another one because making that movie was emotionally draining. So I think I may have waited a couple months before I started something else. Yeah, it probably would have been 6 months.
And because with Halloween Night, you obviously you dedicated it to your brother, and
Yes.
and so finishing that, because I know, like, especially in times of loss and when you do something, like the end of that project sometimes can be more emotional than the during that project because of that. Was that the case in this situation, or do you think it was just the whole thing because you were holding on to a heavy heart?
Yeah, it would have been the whole process was, starting it, shooting it, editing it, finishing it, shopping it around. The whole thing was just a really, it was like dragging weights around. Every step was difficult, but I had to think of it this way: if I had passed away, I would want him to continue, and I know he would think the same. So that kind of kept you focused. Not that it was any easier, but that certainly helped you get through that making a movie without him and whatnot. So it was difficult. It still is to this day. I mean, I wouldn't be fooling anybody if I said it was easy, because it isn't. And unless you're a twin, it's hard to explain. But you lose a piece of yourself, not just a brother and a coworker, but you lose a piece of yourself, and that's a double issue to have to comprehend and overcome. So yeah, it was, and from time to time it still is very difficult.
And trying to bring back up with the technology change in the world since when you started to now, has it been easier to produce, more difficult to produce, or how has it changed in terms of technology?
Technology has certainly made producing a film much easier. I mean, when we started, you had to shoot on film, you had to get it developed, you had to cut it to edit it, which taught me how to edit. I mean, I'm a skilled editor because of that. The process of making a movie never changes, but the tools and the sophistication of the tools that give you much more professional results, in essence, allows you to focus more on the artistry side than the technical side. Because before, you were always struggling with the technology. Camera's not working. The film's stuck in the gate. Why is this overexposed? Because you can't see it till you get it developed. Your light meter broke and you didn't know it. Now everything's too dark and you can't do anything to correct it. The technology really, and it was cumbersome. It forced you to always be worried about the technical side of it, and sometimes that didn't help your actors and whatnot. So the technology has freed you up to focus more on the craft than having to worry about this, that, and everything else. Because when you make a movie and there's only a small handful of people, the process doesn't change. So that means more of you the few of you have to do more roles, fill more roles. So it can be. It's controlled chaos. That's what I like. People say, "What's making a movie?" Like, it's controlled chaos, because that's what it is. It's like putting a puzzle together, but when you buy a puzzle, the pieces are there. When you make a movie, you have to make the pieces and then put them together. So it's crazy, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's madness that I enjoy. If it was like painting a barn for the rest of my life, I'd jump off the side. But to me, it's there's an excitement about it, despite the demands that you might have during the day and the long hours, because I'm always the first one there and the last one to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I go home, I prep for the next day. So when I'm on a 5-day shoot, I'm lucky if I sleep 4 hours a day. But that's the way it has to be. But it's a great process. It's creative, and again, it's not just me. Everyone involved in the process brings something to it that's important and valuable. Their insight, their skills, their acting ability, their ability to do effects. So everyone lends a hand in a film's success, and it's not just me. That's just not the way it is. Steven Spielberg makes great movies because he has great movies. He has great people working with him. George Lucas makes good movies because he has good people working with him. It's everything combined that really come together to make the sum of that whole.
Yeah, I like that though, controlled chaos, because you're not wrong. It's juggling a lot of hats, I guess, especially when you're pretty much the do-it-all person too, and when you have to be, it's a lot of different hats. I want to ask, and again, I have seen a little bit, but I want to ask what your go-to style of directing in terms of dealing with actors and trying to get their best performance out of them. What is your go-to strategy to try and relate to them on whatever scene?
What I typically do is when we assign roles or people audition and they successfully get the roles, typically I'll just sit down and spend a few minutes with them and tell them what I think the character, just give them some background and what their motivations might be and what their attitude and frame of mind is, and then I ask them for their opinion. And then we kind of, okay, let's work with both. A good director doesn't tell his actors how to act. That'd be like the actor telling the director how to direct. An actor comes on board with some sensibilities and technique and methods, and what you do is you kind of, after a couple hours, you kind of understand where they're coming from, and you can make it work. I mean, unless they're way off base and they decide they're going to say every line in soprano, you don't really have too many issues. But sometimes scripts, the way a script is written doesn't always translate well through verbal dialogue. So you kind of have to alter, they may say, this line just doesn't feel right. Okay, well, let's figure out how we can change it without losing the impact, but still getting the point across. And it's a collaborative effort. And then you have to block them, and you don't always shoot a scene all the way through. So there's that stop, start, stop, start. That's why a lot of theater actors don't like shooting film, because they're used to it starts, it ends. In a movie, it's a lot of hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. And for some actors, that's difficult because they get into the head of the character. They're method actors, and they have to stay at this point through the whole thing, and that can be physically and mentally draining for people depending on their process. So you kind of have to understand where they're coming from, and they have to understand where you're coming from. And I think once you establish that, then it's pretty smooth sailing.
Is that a quick thing to notice, though, with your actor, that you notice what kind of style of acting they're used to?
Within an hour or so, I pretty much can figure it out. And if we haven't had time to have any real discussion, you can tell the different styles that are out there and how to work. Again, it's such a giant juggling act. How to work with them and someone else and other people in the scene, and how to block it where the camera's going to be. It's controlled chaos. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that's you get to figure out on a lot of your movies with just the nature of horror movies and with sci-fi too, you get to plan out death scenes, which has to feel weird if you're up all night figuring out how to kill someone. Pretty much.
Yeah, it's not quite that sociopathic, but it really comes down to how you're going to technically do that, and you have to figure it out through what you want to show the audience and what you don't want to show the audience, and then you have to figure out the technical pieces that you need, like if someone's getting chased with a machete and they get stabbed. Okay, there's a lot of different ways you could have a fake knife that retracts. You could have a body that you actually shove a real one through. And how do you film that? How do you film that to edit it so it looks real when people see it? Because the worst thing you want to do is linger on things, which is what we would do early on in our career. It takes 10 seconds for the blood to pump out through the tube, and the actor's just struggling there, and it just didn't work. But as time goes on, you kind of see what's going to work and what isn't, and you kind of know how to film it. So then you know what kind of prosthetic and effects pieces you're going to need to make that work.
Do you find that also, going back to being creative with a low budget, do you find trying to figure out that helps you create more creative deaths? I guess is what I'm trying to ask, which seems a little.
Those movies all have creative, ways that people die, but it depends on the story. A movie like Return to Splatter Farm, the guy uses farm tool implements, so that right then that puts you in a specific zone. It's not so much how they're going to die, it's how do we do it in a creative way, and how are we going to show this, and how can we do it in a way that it hasn't been done before. Because you don't want it to be boring. So you in the matter of death, you do have to be creative and come up with interesting ways. We did years and years ago. We shot. We were doing a Super 8 film, and you always cut away and then cut back. Like if someone gets shot, you show the gun and then you cut back to them, because we couldn't do squibs. Those are dangerous, and you just, I never wanted to get into a situation where someone could be harmed, and I still don't do that. It's just not worth it. But we had this guy in a hood, and he was chasing someone around, and he grabs his shotgun from him and he shoots him at his face. And we thought, well, let's make a false head of this person, which my brother did, and we filled it we went into the kitchen fridge and just loaded it with kidney bean salad and ketchup and Jell-O and our fake blood and paper towels torn up and thrown in. So when we shot it, it would just explode, like just blow it up, which it did. It literally was all over the backyard. But the thing was why don't we do it in mid-scream? So instead of cutting away from it, we'll show him scream. We'll show the guy lift the gun and put his finger on the trigger. We cut back to the real actor scream, and then bam, his head gets blown off. So we had to figure out how to do that. And we had to position the head. We filmed the actor scream, and we marked it. We marked it off visually, and then we put our fake head in there and positioned it as close as we could, and then shot it with a shotgun at 2 a.m. Surprised my parents didn't send us to a reform school, but we filmed it, splattered it. It was gone. All that was left was the shoulders, which is what we really wanted. And so in the editing, I went and match framed that. And when we put the sound effect in, it was like, and we would show it to people, and they'd be like, because they weren't expecting, they were expecting it to cut away or not show it at all. So you kind of come up with things like that. And by God, it did look. I just watched that maybe a year ago, and it's still pretty startling for a bunch of 15-year-olds. It was pretty. It was pretty on target.
gunshots at 2 a.m. and nothing? Like, you didn't get.
No, we lived out in the country,
Yeah.
but God bless my parents. I miss them both.
Mm-hmm.
They were supportive in the fact that they never had us hauled away. They didn't understand often what we were trying to do, but they never got in our way. They never said, I don't want you doing this anymore. I wouldn't let my kids do half the things I did. So it was kind of nice. There wasn't that boundary that you knew you couldn't go beyond or you get in trouble. We just would do whatever, and there was no backlash. None whatsoever. There probably should have been, but there never was.
So with your movies and a lot of them that have cult followings, first of all, do you see the reaction to your own films? You talked about earlier about seeing the VHS and having that quick 5-minute elation, but with the cult following that a lot of your films have, do you see their reaction? And then how do you feel about the fact that that your films have a quote unquote cult following, and then B, their reaction to your films?
Well, it's it's rewarding because there's people out there that enjoy what you do. I mean, there's a lot of people that watch one of my films and will rip it apart, but that's just everyone's a critic. And honestly, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I could honestly see why someone who watched Transformers 3 then watched Peter Rottentail might be a little disillusioned, but we're not aiming for that. So I think people that see it for what it is get it, and the films have their fans, legions of them, which again shocked me. You live in this bubble and you don't think anything gets out there, but I've been all over the United States and I run into people that know who I am, and they're like, oh, I saw this, and oh, we love your movies, or I saw this, it wasn't that good, and
Oh no,
you get it, you get it all, but you have to, when you put yourself out there, you have to be prepared for that. But it's nice. Couple years ago, I was invited to the Alamo Draft House to show movies in Texas, at the Alamo Draft House in Austin, Texas, to show a couple of my movies. It was a packed house. Hundreds and hundreds of people. It was terrifying. But they really got into it, and they could ask questions, and they had great questions. So you connect with these people, whether it's in person or by happenstance, or they email you or Facebook message you, or there's a lot of ways now that people can communicate with you. And occasionally you get those, you should stop making movies. I always laugh when I get those. I get like one a year. I get something like that. And you never know who sent it. They're like
It's
very
always
anonymous.
Yeah.
Could be my wife. I'm not sure.
Just, I want you home, or stop me. Yeah. Have you been surprised by anyone specifically who said that they're really a fan of your stuff? I hang out, or I would go to Hollywood, and I still do occasionally. I worked out there off and on, and I would run into people that were in the industry. The lay person might not know them, but I knew who they were, and they would say, "Oh yeah, I've seen your movies. I really like them." Actually, we shot a movie called Among Us. It's sort of this Bigfoot pseudo documentary thing, and one of the female actresses in it did voiceover work in LA and stuff, and she was friends with the guy who played Fish Boy in the movie in Hellboy. I can't think of the guy's name, but he was also in Pan's Labyrinth, and he plays. He's a somewhat well-known guy, and she was with him. They were going to go to some rock concert. I forget. I think it was a Tom Petty concert, and she was showing him movies that she was in, and
Every time she put one in, he goes, that's boring. But they put in Among Us, and he wouldn't. They were late to the concert because he would not leave till he finished it.
That's
And
incredible.
oddly enough, he ran into the writer of that at Indiana State University, where he went to school, and he actually came up to the writer and he said, "Hey, this may sound weird, but I really loved Among Us." He said, "I thought you guys did a great job." Now, this is a working professional.
Wow.
Working professional. So you never, I guess the moral of the story is it doesn't matter how famous someone is who watches your movie. The moral of the story is that this stuff gets out there and people see it. People see it. And you would be shocked at who watches these types of movies.
It's a fun watch. I watched a bunch of them, or some of the ones that are on Amazon Prime over the weekend. I love them. I absolutely love them. But yeah, speaking of that, for those listening who might want to go watch some of the movies, where can they?
Well, you used to be able to go to things called video stores, but they literally
R.I.P.
don't exist, except for Family Video. They have a lot of our movies. You could go to Amazon. There's a lot of streaming sites on Roku that have them. eBay sells copies. I mean, it's the industry's changing, so that physical delivery, that mode of physical delivery, just isn't there anymore. But we always had a couple movies on the shelves: at Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, and there was another one that was big. I can't remember the name of it. Family Video is the only one left, but Movie Gallery was the other one. So our stuff was in all those, and then those disappeared, and then streaming came around. Walmart, we've had a few movies in Walmart. So they're like the number one retailer of movies in the United States anyway. But it's hard to get in there because there's so much competition, and they have some pretty strange the protocol there is a little strange. So you're lucky if you do get in there, but we have twice. So, the stuff gets around. People buy it. People pirate it. I mean, all the time. So, it's your legacy, and you don't really, someone else writes your legacy. That's not up to me. When I'm dead and gone, then someone will take a comprehensive, critical look at what I've done. And I wish I could see it, because it would be interesting to see what they come up with.
All right. Yeah, I've weirdly, morbidly thought about that too. So obviously, some of your films have been shot here at Mansfield University. And you've used some of the faculty and staff and students maybe in your films.
Oh yeah. We've used students, we've used faculty, staff. It just depends on the project and who's interested and what project it is. Every project's different, and I make so many movies. You really have to spread your actors around so it doesn't look like you're watching a soap opera. The same people showing up all the time. But, we've even had Eric Roberts, Julia Roberts' brother, was in one of our films.
Wow.
And I can't remember the woman's name, but she was in Ace Ventura. And then another gal was in Road Trip with Tom Green. So we've had a few celebs, if that's what you want to call them. But, every actor that works with us is in my book, a celebrity. I don't care what they have or haven't been in. They're people, And you can't look at some of these celebrities like put them on a what do they say? Put them up on a pedestal.
pedestal, yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't think of it, but because it's funny, you know, I ran into Eric Roberts and was talking to him, and he didn't even remember.
Really?
He didn't even remember the movie.
Granted, I feel like Eric Roberts has also been in a lot of
Yeah, I'm
different
sure
things.
he wouldn't remember, but I had to remind him. Oh yeah. I knew he still didn't. I knew he was just, you know, trying to get past that
Oh, no.
embarrassing moment. But it's interesting when you look back when you have a career like this, because it is a career. It's a lifelong career, and you can see where you've been and where you're at, and it's really where are you going. You know, you never know what the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years is going to bring. You just keep doing it, and people say, well, do you do it for the money? Heck no. If I did it for the money, I would have given up a long time ago. It's a passion, you know. It really, it's the passion. That's what drives me. It's not fame or fortune. I never wanted that, and I don't. Well, the fortune part might be nice, but nonetheless, that's not the reason I do it. That's an after effect of doing what I do for so long. But it's the love of doing it that has not wavered to this day. You know, hobbies, it's not a hobby. People think it's a hobby. It's not. You know, when you build model cars for a hobby, you get bored with that after a while, I'm sure. At least I would. That's why I don't do it. But it's not a hobby. It's I don't want to make movies. I have to make movies. It's that simple.
I like it. So along those lines, then, what advice would you give to young filmmakers who want to do something similar, or even make movies in any way? What would be the advice?
Right. My advice would be do it. I meet so many people who say, oh yeah, I'm gonna make my first movie, but I need this, that, and it's like, no, you don't need all that. You already have enough to make a movie. Just go out and do it. I think people think making movies is easy. It is not. They think it's fun. It is to a degree, and you know, they may want to do it, but they'll put obstacles in their way so they don't have to do it. And that was never part of my mantra. It was do it. We will do it. There is no we're going to try. It's we will do it. And no matter what you have. And today it's so easy to make a movie. You just have to do it. And then you get, well, it's not going to be good. Of course it isn't. But you'll make another one that'll be better. I mean, I've paid to go see movies that I didn't think were that good. And they're working professionals. So it's all a matter of opinion. But until you do it, you're never going to know, and you're never going to get better unless you keep doing it. So you got to start somewhere. Start now. If you really want to do it, start now.
I like that. Just go out and do it.
Yeah, it's that simple and it's that difficult. It's a double-edged sword, but, you know, you're going to get cut sooner or later in this career. So just go ahead and do it. I'm glad we attacked it when we were naive enough to think that it was doable, because I was, and this is such a profound thing. I was at the Alamo Draft House, and some guy, I was answering questions, and this guy stood up and he said, Mark, what made you think you could ever make a movie? And I had to stop, and it took me by surprise. I never thought about it, and I thought about it for a second, and I told him, I said, you know what, sir, it never occurred to me that I couldn't. And that was kind of a revelation, because in my life I'd never thought about it until someone presented me with that question. And that's the real honest to goodness answer. Never in my mind did I think, I can't do this. Therefore you'd try, and you do. There was no preconception of failure. It was, we'll do it. And that question really made me think about it, because it's never been put to me that way before. And it was a good question. I don't know what he was looking for. Maybe it was one of those. He was like maybe he really said you can't make a movie. What
Yeah,
makes
how
you
could
think
you
you
ever?
still can? But it was kind of a profound moment. I thought about it after I answered the question because it really was. You come full circle. You shouldn't put obstacles in your own way. And you shouldn't let other people put obstacles in your way, no matter what you want to do. Whether it's movie making or raising cattle or painting pictures. You really have to. You're going to get people that tell you can't do it. You're going to get people that criticize you when you do. You can't doubt yourself. My motto is get beside me, get behind me, but don't get in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll run you over. I'm not going to stop doing what I do because you think I shouldn't or can't. It's simple, naive. There's certainly no proverb, but it's gotten me this far.
Hey, I like it. I want it on a T-shirt.
Let's do it.
Stand beside me or behind me, but don't stand in front of me. I like it, though. I absolutely like it.
Well, and that's, you got to think the key to success, no matter what you do, is perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to lie to you. There were moments in this journey where I thought, why am I doing this? Why, I'm done. They were fleeting and far, between, but still, I'm not saying I'm like Mr. Confident. There were times, discouraging times when you think, what's the point of all this? And then you really have to stop and think, okay, what are my motives now, and why have they changed when 2 years ago it didn't bother me? So you have to reassess yourself and go, I'm doing this, here's why I'm doing this, and then that puts you back on track and gives you the right perspective, because it can be discouraging. You needn't do more than type my name in Google and read all the terrible reviews. They're there, and again, people have a right to their opinion, and I won't knock anyone for that. But when you say, I could make a better movie with my dad's iPhone, you know what? Go ahead. It's a twofold thing. It's you're inspiring someone, whether it's through I really love that. That's great. You inspired me to make a movie, and I did it. Or I thought that was the biggest piece of crap I ever saw, and I knew I could do better. It's a win-win situation. You've inspired them both ways. You can't lose with Polonia Brothers Entertainment.
I like that. Yeah, that's a way to... Yeah, you inspire. Either way, I like that a lot. All right, so I want to switch into the two questions I ask, and I'm going to ask everyone who's on this podcast. The first one is, what is your go-to meal to impress? Either you're making it, but you want to impress. Either it's a date or a family gathering or an important business meeting. Meal to impress.
That's a good question. First of all, I've been married for 31 years, so I don't have to impress anyone. Secondly, I couldn't cook to save my life. All I know is what I know. If I were going to impress someone with a meal, it would probably be some kind of seafood dish.
All right.
Because you can mix a lot of different things with seafood. You can throw some veggies on there. Most people like seafood. And it's expensive, so it kind of puts you out there like you're not some cheapskate going to get something on the dollar menu at McDonald's. So I would have to say a seafood dish.
All right.
And that's a long shot because, again, I'm way out of base on that question. But
hey,
I'm going to answer it anyway.
And then the second one is, so you've made a lot of films, so you've probably spoken publicly a lot. And I want to hear your most embarrassing public speaking moment, but you don't have to explain it fully. I just need three words or phrases, and there will be no follow-up question. For example, my worst public speaking moment is high school game show Bleach.
Mine would be third grade, public report in front of the class, zipper down.
All right, and no follow-up question for that.
You don't need to. I just told you everything.
Yeah, well, all right. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on Conversations and talking about your career.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a great time.
All right, and that's going to do it for us here. Folks, make sure you come back for another fantastic episode of Mansfield University Conversations. Thank you so much for listening.